战斗民族俄罗斯的总统普京给大家印象就是很霸、很 man。如果您记得的话，普丁面对这个现实的国际关系当中，他有话直说，根本没在怕的。另外，他练了一身的肌肉哦，是一个练家子。不过，我们要问，是不是因为人红是非多，最近他的争议还蛮多的？第一个，英国的司法机构说，他们在调查一个毒杀案件当中，发现到被毒死的这个嫌犯，竟然普丁涉嫌重大，是普丁叫别人毒死他的，真的吗？另外，美国的官员说，俄罗斯整个国家从头到尾都是贪污，因为他们贪污指数是全世界垫底最后1名，而且是总统带头贪污，因为光普丁个人资产多达400多亿美金，这么有钱啊？真的吗？普丁真的有400多亿美金的身价吗？
坐在办公室中会被丢进下水道冲走，正在临场中会被锯木刀切碎。甚至被最新武器轰成一片飞灰。只要普丁出马，贪官通通落马。这一系列堪称是贪官1000种死法的最新动画，在俄罗斯社群网站上一夕爆红。动画中，普丁宛如黑面判官，处决贪官毫不留情。而在现实中，普丁不但几乎要反贪，还要把贪官污的钱通通拿回来。
Возвращать активы нелегально или незаконно выведенные в другие юрисдикции.
对于普丁的反贪腐行动，俄罗斯人民似乎都乐见其成。但日前公布的全球清廉指数，俄罗斯在168个国家中稳稳垫底。美国财政部官员更直接公开指控普丁本人也贪污。
How long has the United States known that Vladimir Putin was, in your words, a corrupt figure?
I think for many, many years.
外传普丁隐藏版财富高达400亿美金，折合新台币约1.35兆元。不过，普丁完全否认。2014年所公布的个人财务报表，普丁年收入只有11万9千美金，名下也只有2户公寓和停车位。不论外界信还是不信，反贪的确成了俄罗斯的热门关键字。而莫斯科当局也似乎希望借由反贪腐来拉抬不断随着经济下滑的。
Vladimir Putin has come a long way. He wasn't born rich, and to understand him, you need to go to his home city, St. Petersburg.
This is where he grew up, there on the 5th floor. Putin's family had one room in a shared apartment, no hot water, and a shared kitchen in the corridor. Vladimir Putin grew up in poverty.
But it was in St. Petersburg that Vladimir Putin first tasted power. Back in the 90s, not long out of the KGB, Putin became a deputy mayor. On his watch, millions of dollars disappeared from public funds to a company called 20th Trust. The detective who investigated says Putin was one of those who benefited.
Hey, Andrei.
He says Putin ended up with a property in Torrevieja in Spain.
If 20th Trust is building a villa for Putin in Torrevieja, is this Putin personally receiving the money or not? In my opinion, the answer is straightforward.
But the criminal case was closed after Putin became president. Zhikov says he was forced into retirement.
The Kremlin has
Petersburg, Putin learned how to profit from power. He also built a loyal team. After he moved to the Kremlin, they came with him.
The men closest to Putin have been with him for years. They were with him here in St. Petersburg, and they've stayed with him ever since. And this is the group that he trusts and that he rewards. And this is the group that runs Russia.
Putin's lawyer at the town hall became president and then prime minister of Russia. His former deputy also served as prime minister. The chief of staff at the town hall now runs Russia's anti-drugs agency. His former assistant now runs the biggest oil company in the world. And his former economist now runs the biggest gas company in the world. All of them worked with Putin in this building.
They rose up together, they went with him to Moscow, and they have been a very stable elite. This whole group who grabbed the commanding heights of the Russian economy, they all work together in a very small office, in fact, in St. Petersburg.
And as president, Putin was at the center of this new elite. He had power and access to the super rich. You can see how Putin used this by looking at his relationship with Britain's most famous Russian, Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich. Now, he was one of the unwitting donors to Putin's palace. He thought all his cash would be spent on healthcare, and he gave more than $200 million. Is untrue. But the Americans have highlighted another energy company that they say Putin has links to. It's called Gunvor. According to the Americans, Putin had secret investments in the company.
What exactly do you mean by investments?
We believe that it's a place where he's stored money.
And how much money would you say?
I can't give you an estimate on that.
Gunvor told us these claims were illogical and preposterous conspiracy theories, and that President Putin does not and never has had any ownership in Gunvor. The Americans insist they're right, but they haven't provided any evidence. It's important because Gunvor has traded much of Russia's state oil. It's made big profits, and nearly half of the company was owned by this man, Gennady Timchenko, one of Putin's friends. He's now sold his stake. It's said he's worth $10 billion. And he's on the US sanctions list. The Americans claim his activities in the energy sector have been directed by President Putin.
Has Gennady Timchenko been holding wealth for Vladimir Putin, do you think?
I don't know if I would put it exactly that way in terms of holding his wealth. I can say that he has been tremendously enriched personally by Vladimir Putin, as have another handful of people in Putin's inner circle. And of course, there are allegations, suspicions that he holds tremendous amounts of Putin's wealth.
Gennady Timchenko's lawyers said the US has never produced any evidence, and its claims were propaganda in which our client is a collateral target. Mr. Timchenko categorically denies that President Putin has ever controlled his assets or enriched him. But two of our sources say Mr. Timchenko was very much under the control of Vladimir Putin.
How do you know that?
From Mr. Timchenko himself, that you see, sometimes he could just pointing up in talks and saying that everything is controlled by Mikhail Ivanovich. Mikhail Ivanovich is a nickname for the Putin.
From the very start, Putin understood that money which Timchenko is managing, one way or another, without any doubt, belonged to Putin. It was never a secret.
Mr. Timchenko's lawyers say our two main sources are not credible and may have axes to grind.